The Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by The Athletic. For sports fans, there's no better place to get breaking news, real-time commentary, and powerful stories than The Athletic. With comprehensive coverage and insightful analysis built around your teams, The Athletic delivers everything you need on every sports story that matters. Download the app, follow your favorite teams and leagues, and get a personalized feed of ad-free content every single day. For access to all the stories at the heart of the game, visit theathletic.com/spottrack, SPOTRAC. Get 40% off your first year subscription today. Happy Monday morning. My name is Mike Giannetti. Plenty of sports to get to, plenty of sports to watch this weekend. And I'm going to pick and choose a few of the greatest hits for sure to get to this morning, including, of course, Phil Mickelson's incredible run. I don't know how to say it any other way. It was must-see TV. I couldn't leave to even go to the bathroom. It was that kind of TV from 50-year-old Phil Mickelson. Here's your payouts. I put it on Twitter. I'll say it here as well. Mickelson gets just over $2.1 million for that win. Brooks Koepka and Louis Oosthuizen share just over $1 million each for tying second. And it goes down from there. 4 tied at fourth for about $462K. 9 tied for eighth at $263K. And 6 tied at 17th for about $168,000. So I mentioned it today. Brooks Koepka, that putt on 18, difficult putt, 20 plus feet. But that birdie putt misses just a bit, and he removes himself for about $240,000 in tying with Oosthuizen. So that's how it works out in these majors. It gets one shot here or there can really swing your final payout. That's just how it works when you're tying. Just on that, by the way, for those who don't know, if you find slotted payouts for a PGA Championship or a tournament, they'll give you the payouts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in the instance of a tie, so for instance, there was a tie for second with Brooks and Louis. What you do is you take the payout for 2, payout for 3, and you average them. And those two players get the average of those two payouts. So if there's a 9-way tie, it's the average of those 9 payouts. Everybody gets that price. So, the numbers at the end of the day are going to look a little different than the slotted payouts based on who ended up where and based on those ties. So just a little heads up as to how that works. So career rankings. This puts Phil almost to $95 million in terms of on-course earnings. 94.6 million. He's largely in second place all time, behind Tiger Woods, who's at 120.8, and then Jim Furyk, Dustin Johnson, Vijay Singh. That's your 3, 4, 5, and those 3 are very, very close. I expect Dustin to pass Jim Furyk in the next couple of weeks here, with a couple of if he makes the cut, but he'll be the third place finisher here at the end of the day. But he's got quite a lot of work to do to catch Phil. I mean, this Phil Tiger situation, it's hands over heads over here in terms of career earnings. I just don't know that we're going to see it. A major like this gets you $2 million to win. The Masters a little bit more than that. You really have to pile on longevity and major championships to get yourself even close to that $100 million mark. It's just how it works. Now, you can win the FedEx at the end and bring in that $10 million that Dustin gives you. That's a separate little bonus. That's not part of the PGA earnings. That's just kind of like a separate sponsorship payday. It's a good one, but it doesn't account in terms of what we have here with the PGA on-course tournament earnings. So there's ways to make money, plenty of ways to make money playing golf. There's no question about it. But the gap between 1 and 3 right now and 2 and 3, to be honest, is big and getting bigger because Phil's doing things like this still. So that was quite an experience for all of us. And the fan experience, boy, welcome back, fans. Can't say much more about that. Got a little squirrely there for a few minutes, but all the best. That's as good as it gets in terms of sports viewing and sports TV right there. Okay, not a real way to smoothly transition into this, but it's time for me to start talking about Deshaun Watson a little bit because we sort of have some concrete dates and some concrete information out there. Mike Florio has done a really nice job of documenting this, as you might expect. The lawyer / sports analyst in him. It's getting down to that time now where off-season workouts are really happening. The Texans have added 4 quarterbacks, some with $1 million+ of guarantees. it's looking like they're setting themselves up for a situation where Deshaun Watson will not be available to them. Here's my 2 cents into how things are looking. We now know that his deposition's February 22nd, and that's obviously purposeful. That's the court system saying, okay, you have a job to do, and we're gonna delay this thing until after your job frees you up eventually. So February 22nd, 2022 is the preliminary date on his deposition. And there's certainly plenty to go with this. With all the accusations that I believe are over 20, well over 20 now, 22 now maybe. That's going to take quite a bit of time. It's going to be a drawn out process, and rightfully so, as due process kind of takes its path. But from what it sounds like, none of this is going to happen during the season. You're going to have your reports and updates, and hopefully not new cases, but things are going to come out for sure over the coming months here. But it doesn't sound like legally things are going to at least find any kind of grounding until February, until after the season. So what does that mean for his 2021 season football-wise? To me, it's 2 things. A, things just sort of pause enough to the point of where the NFL says, we can't do anything until the legal process does their thing. So we're just going to let this guy play football. And, when it becomes time for him to hit the courts, we're going to let that play out, and we'll make more distinct decisions at that point. So after February 22nd, up until the time when that deposition closes. It's probably not likely. It's probably 45% that that's the case, that he's actually just given the chance to go play football while this is all being worked out behind the scenes. The majority of us all think he's going to hit the commissioner exempt list, which is a paid list. He'd make his $10.5 million. He'd be on the exempt list. He wouldn't count as a roster spot. And the Texans will just have to play football without his services. The most famous recent example of this is Adrian Peterson, who was having the issues with the child abuse. Minnesota entered the season with him playing, actually, and they gave him the ability to go around this and play football despite the allegations and the court systems figuring out their ends. They quickly turned. I think there was a big push from the Minnesota fans, from NFL fans, and the league basically clamped down and said, no, we've got to get this guy off the field because he's bringing us the wrong kind of distractions, and rightfully so. So they did end up putting him on the exempt list about week 2, September 14th of 2014. And he became eligible to come off it in mid-November because his court system, he entered a plea, settled out of it, went through the proper channels, was from an exempt list. He was able to come off the exempt list, but the league stepped in and evaluated the process that happened in the courts and said, no, we're going to suspend you actually without pay now for the rest of the season. So the second half of 2014, Peterson did not make his salary. He stayed away from the Minnesota facilities, and he was allowed back February 26th, I believe, 2015. So that's just one example of how this can go if the court situation was mid-season. That's not the case here with Deshaun. So to me, it's going to be an all or nothing. Either he's going to be allowed to play or at least stay off that list and be active, in which case I would imagine Houston would play him. And because there's not a deposition or any kind of formal court process happening mid-season, I'm not sure that'd be interrupted too much. I think he'd probably get the chance to play all 18 this year. But I just don't think that's likely. With the cloud that's hanging over him, it seems like the team / league won't make the mistake they made with Peterson, which was to try to let him go out there and play through this. And it sounds like, that he's just going to get exempted right away. Let's take him off the table until things clean up, obviously, as they need to, one way or another. And then we'll decide from there, versus let's not make this a mid-season bigger issue than it actually is for him and the parties involved. So that'd be my assessment of it. I don't think there's a chance he's traded in the midst of all this. So to me, those conversations are dead. And it's really just all about the list, the exempt list. Like I said, it's a paid list. He would make his salary on that list, but would not count against the roster and would likely stay there the entire season leading up to that deposition in February. So just a quick update on how that would work, at least how we're projecting that to work. In other football news, purely speculation, but people close to the Atlanta Falcons know, not just the general public, are saying that this Julio Jones situation is probably as real as it's ever going to be. And I believe it. This was something I had predicted with my bubble report back in December, January. And not that I predicted he'd be traded, but he's just one of those guys that from a cap perspective, even though he's still one of the best receivers in football, walking in with a $23 million cap hit on a team that had cap issues in a league that was going down cap-wise, all the red flags were there. And, this is a team that struggled the last couple of years, even though the offense has been ticking pretty well. I think they can afford, believe it or not, to get by without Julio Jones. I think they have enough depth. I think the draft selection they just made is even more depth at that position from a pass catching situation for Matt Ryan. May not click week one right out of the gate, but I do think they can go and at least seek the first round pick that they're asking for. And that's certainly what they're asking for. I don't think it's realistic. I think they end up settling for a second round pick and maybe a player. And I think the teams that are being identified in terms of Vegas, right? The Vegas odds on where Julio Jones could land, 49ers, Colts, and the Chargers, which all make perfect sense to me, are the betting odds right now. Patriots are in there with the Ravens, about 600 plus 700. And then the Titans, who definitely need a wide receiver, but I don't think have the ammo that is cap space plus players to give back in return. I don't think they have the ammo, and they're in the thousands with the Packers, by the way, who, I don't know. That's just not what they do, right? Who's the dark horse here? Who's the dark horse here? I think the dark horse team is the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals have surprised us 3 times this offseason, and I still don't think they've done enough. I don't think what they have right now is enough. Now, they may be considering just bringing back Larry Fitzgerald if he, obviously if he wants to come back for one more ride. There's a waiting game with him. It may just be that Arizona says, Larry, we love you. We'll have you back in any capacity you want in the front office or the marketing department, whatever you want to be, ambassadorship, whatever it's going to be. He's a Cardinal for life. But I think if you can upgrade to Julio Jones with a high pick and maybe a receiver or something back, an Isabella or some kind of player like that back, I think you have to do it. I think if you want to give back a young receiver that's cap friendly for the Falcons, and you want to push and go all in on what you've done with DeAndre Hopkins, with J.J. Watt, with a couple of defensive draft picks, I think knowing what they have in Kyler Murray, and the James Conner situation at running back, which if he's healthy could really work out in that offense, this is the all-in move. This is the next and maybe final all-in move that Arizona can make. So they're plus 2,500 right now in Vegas. But they've already surprised us too many times for me to have them way down there like this. Now, I think the Patriots are the most likely, even though they're 5th on this list. This is the kind of move they make. Midsummer or late spring, early summer. What's our biggest deficiency on this roster? Do we think we have a chance to compete in our division, in our conference? I think all those answers are probably yes right now. And I'd still focus on a legitimate wide receiver one as the whole. I think that's right. The defense looks outstanding. I think that's the whole. They've upgraded the tight end position. They've upgraded the quarterback position, we think, in Mac Jones. We don't know if we'll see that week one, but that's a move they make. So they're my favorites in terms of these betting odds. But look out for these Cardinals because you just can't have enough weapons for a young quarterback. And this would be experience up on top of experience on top of experience. They don't have a real great tight end. So could you use, a Julio Jones situation in the red zone? Absolutely. Absolutely. If that's his primary role and his job is to catch touchdown passes this year, he's going to sign up for that. Yes, he'd have to restructure. Everybody's going to have to restructure. But to me, that's the dark horse. Now, what's it going to take? It's going to take, you're going to have to be able to account for $15.3 million just to get him in the door. That's what the actual accounting will look like to acquire him from a cap hit perspective in 2021. You can do whatever you want with the cap hit after you acquire it, but you have to initially acquire the $15.3 million. So there's only a handful of teams that can do that. And by the way, Arizona, in terms of my numbers, about 13.3 to work with. So they're going to have to make some tweaks to make it happen. But that's minimal. That's small stuff. That's peanuts to get it done. So they're right there on that fringe. They're the team on the outside slightly looking in right now in terms of being able to financially afford him. There's 12 teams above that have the means. San Francisco is one of them. The Patriots are one of them. The Chargers are one of them. The Colts are one of them. So you're looking at teams right there who are on these, on at least on the list for Julio Jones, who have the cap means to get it done. And then Arizona's fringe. Baltimore's got work to do. The Raiders who are on this list, they have a ton of work to do cap-wise to make this fit. The Titans have a ton of work to do. They'd have to either send a big cap back, release a big cap, or make some massive restructures, probably to Tannehill, who carries the highest base salary in football this year. So, how much work do you want to do to the rest of your roster to bring in a guy like this? That's the question internally these teams have to ask. But I just look at Arizona. They're sitting with 13.5, knowing that they could get to that point of where they could acquire him. And is that the piece that takes them over the top offensively? I think it's possible. All right, moving along quickly here. We're going to bring in Scott Allen, and we'll talk about the NBA and NHL teams that were eliminated this weekend and what their offseason looks like, notable free agents, cap situations, draft situations, all that good stuff. Some interesting characters that go with a few of these teams for sure. But first, today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Morgan Stanley Global Sports and Entertainment, dedicated to serving the unique wealth management needs of athletes and top professionals in the sports and entertainment industry. Morgan Stanley Global Sports and Entertainment strives to bring sports professionals the financial solutions they need, including access to financing, to support both prospective NFL and NBA athletes through the draft process. Find out more about Morgan Stanley's pre- and post-draft loan program at morganstanley.com/GSE. That's morganstanley.com/GSE. Okay, joined quickly by Scott. A couple of eliminations this weekend. So let's start with the NBA, Scott, and then we'll get to the NHL as well, because both have some interesting characters to discuss. Indiana, I don't know how they did what they did in that first playing round, but that's not the Indiana Pacers we saw most of the season. Who is this team? Look, notable free agents, Doug McDermott, pretty good shooter. What does this team do? They've locked in their core. They've locked in Malcolm Brogdon. They've locked in Sabonis, nice pieces. Just seems like a team without an identity. I don't know how they're going to attract players. There is a path for them to get to some open cap space if they renounce pretty much everything, outside of the core. But what are your thoughts here about this Indiana Pacers team going forward? Because, they're not in rebuild mode.
They're not in rebuild mode, but we've also seen and heard like Miles Turner could be on the trade block, TJ Warren potentially, Jeremy Lamb. We've heard rumblings over the last year or so of, potential trade candidates.
So is that you think what's going to happen, like secondary trades?
Yeah, I do think so.
Yeah.
Their core is definitely around Sabonis. Brogdon is definitely their point guard moving forward. And then, they had a little bit of a picture of LeVert after having all the injury stuff after that trade. This is a team that's probably going to have to make trades to upgrade their roster because they are not a free agent destination, which is why they've made the moves that they have in the past. They acquired Sabonis from Oklahoma City in that Paul George trade. They acquired Malcolm Brogdon in a sign and trade from Milwaukee. So this is a franchise that is going to have to make trades to upgrade their roster and go through the draft. But, having made it as far as they did, their draft position is not going to be in that top 10 to get a premier player. So they're going to have to make a trade one way or another to upgrade the roster.
Is Miles Turner still a name? I mean, is that a name that the contenders are still going to be looking at this offseason if he is truly on the trade block, or is his polish kind of worn a little bit?
No, I think he's definitely going to be someone that teams look at, especially if they need one more piece or in that one piece is a big man. I think he is a guy that could be sought after.
All right. So maybe sellers more than buyers this offseason. The Golden State Warriors. We've talked about this a lot, but it's here officially. Their offseason is here. Kelly Oubre, Kent Bazemore are the notable free agents. Oubre kind of the bigger one because of what it took to get him here. The expiring contract of Steph, not this year, one more year. So he's 1 year, $46 million right now, which sounds incredible to say out loud. You know, this isn't going to be a cap space team. I mean, they're basically negative 50 in terms of practicality.
Yep.
The draft pick is probably the most interesting part about this, outside of maybe a major trade that I can't even speculate on right now until we kind of understand. They're waiting to see where this lottery falls first, right? That's step one for this entire offseason, maybe even before they extend Steph.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, right now they're slotted 6th based on record where Minnesota was. But depending on where that lottery falls, I mean, that pick could be real important moving forward if they wanted to make a trade with another team.
What are the ramifications that they wouldn't have that pick? What are the conditions for that pick, Scott?
So it's top 3 protected. So say Minnesota lands in 1, 2, or 3 when the lottery hits, Minnesota would get it. Otherwise, if it's a 4 and below, Golden State gets it. And this draft, they're saying there are 5 legit players.
Right.
So
they need to be 4 or 5. That's right.
They need to be 4 and 5.
Otherwise, what? Otherwise, it's just a pick because it's probably not tradable at that point.
Well, depending on what their scouting department is saying, I could see Golden State certainly taking a pick if they're in 6, 7, 8, because the league wants you to rebuild through the draft to a certain extent. So the fact that they had Wiseman, if he can come back and with that experience and fit in better, and then you get Clay back, and then you get, even if it is a top 10 pick, they're sort of restocking behind Clay and behind Steph, depending on if they extend Steph or Steph moves on. Draymond, we've seen where he has been, beginning of the year, he was struggling. He sort of came on, but is still, a shell of himself for the most part from years past. So this could be a way for them to sort of restock through the draft and bring in, if their scouting department feels that these are guys that are dead on. Because keep in mind, they also have their the 14th pick as well right now,
right?
So they have 2 in the top 15 if you want to look at it that way.
Right, which isn't going to get them to the championship, But you're right. It is a 4 or 5 year solution to at least restocking the pool. That was kind of going to be my last question: is knowing what we know now about this team, and I don't think too much is going to change. I really don't. I mean, Oubre out, but I think Wiggins definitely took over the bigger role anyway on this team, and maybe even Poole to some degree. We saw what Steph just did. Is getting Clay back going to be enough of a boost to put these guys in real West contention? Maybe not top 3, but middle of the pack at least. Is that going to be enough, or is this a team that's going to have to go and be a bit of a buyer this offseason via the trade?
No, I think with a combination of Clay coming back, and if you are able to draft, like we just talked about, 2 players, or you trade one and you at least get a top 10 pick, you're filling in with some legit guys that could fill in at the back end of the roster and learn. Because right now they have a lot of minimum salary guys that they may like, but they could potentially move on from, that are non-guaranteed. So I think just bringing Clay back with what is on the roster right now, I think we're okay.
Yeah, probably a decent starting point, although you don't want to mess with Steph's long-term prowess here. Okay, let's switch gears to the NHL playoffs. Admittedly, haven't seen too much of it with my own eyes, but I'm certainly keeping up with it, in the publications and on Twitter and whatnot. So I'm aware of what just happened with the Boston-Washington series, which that sounded like a heck of a first round for sure. Similar situation, kind of a smooth transition from Steph to Ovechkin. We talked about it a little bit last week, Scott. Ovechkin's now an expired contract. What are you hearing? What are you thinking? Because it's Ovechkin and basically every goaltender is what the Washington Capitals have to deal with this offseason. That's not an easy task to fill. That's not an easy task. So What's the game plan here? Are they going to try to tread water, put Ovechkin on 1-year deals from here out, you think? Or is it going to be more of a long-term situation? I can't imagine he leaves.
No, I can't either. I think he finishes his career here in Washington. I can't see him in another jersey. And as close as he's getting with all-time goal scoring, I could see them just doing 1 year or maybe a 1-2 year deal, short-term deal to see where it gets them. He's still productive. I haven't heard one way or another. I know the one day I was listening, they were talking about how the value of Ovechkin's contract, because it was a 13-year deal, but the production that they got out of that 13 years, and how it just doesn't happen in most cases to get that production for that long of a time. I think they make him a lifetime Washington Capital and go from there, whether that's in a 1 year, a 2 year.
Well,
I do not.
He's got 730 goals, Scott. He's not going to catch Gretzky's 894. We've talked about this, but Gordie Howe's 801, 70 away. Realistically, how many years is that for him? Because isn't that what the contract should be built around at this point? I understand winning's part of it, but
it should.
Having Ovechkin under contract is part of winning. Let's just be honest here. He hasn't declined enough to where he's not contract worthy. So is that a 3-year contract? 70 goals? Is that safe?
Yeah, I think so. If 25 goals a season, 75 total. Yeah, I could see that happening.
Do you have to go 10 million a year in this guy? It's a really weird. We talked about this a little bit last week with Kobe Bryant and some of those Hall of Famers who got definitely more than they bargained for, more than they were valued at production wise at the twilight of their career. That's where Ovechkin is, except for he's still scoring 30, 40, 50 goals. So how do you give this guy 6 right now? How do you go down from the 8.5 he got over 13 years here?
I guess if you're the team, you go to him and say, it's not a great look, but we know the NHL is really restrictive with their cap. There's never enough space, and can you take a hometown discount to allow us to get a goalie that we need, or get some other players to get deeper into the playoffs to have that chance at one more Stanley Cup championship? That's a hard pill to swallow.
It's real tough. Look, he's been making $10 million a year salary though for the last 8 seasons. I just can't see him going off of that, Scott. They've been making it work for 8 seasons at $10 million, and I realize the cap is slightly below that, but I think a 1 for 10 is going to happen, or a 3 for 30, or a 2 for 20, something in that range. And I just don't know that you mess with this one, is what I'm saying. It's too historic. It's too long term. It's too attached to this franchise. It's like it's an in between Kobe Bryant kind of situation where you just you can't screw around with this one too much. He's still putting butts in seats and doing all the things that you want from a franchise player. So something to watch for sure. I do think the goaltender issue is even more dire than getting Ovechkin under contract. And honestly, that might be something that Ovechkin waits on to see where things progress in that regard as well, because it's not going to be fun for him to finish out his career not winning, even if that record is still hanging out there for him. So also no 1st-round pick. So, this is it's not the year for them to be making a splash too much anywhere at this point.
Well, and we talk about the goals for Ovechkin, and he's been the receiver of unfortunate events. He was part of a lockout.
Yep.
He had the shortened season last season. He had the shortened season this season.
A little bit of an injury this year, which is rare for him.
Right. But had he had full seasons, I would love to know where he would have been with that all-time goal scoring. How close would he have been had he had 3 actual full seasons? That would have been really interesting.
Yeah, it could have been in the conversation at least. It's certainly not anymore, but it could have been in the conversation. So he's a week over 35 years old. So I don't think we should crystallize him just yet. I do think there's something left in the tank. Can he make it 30 goals a year here? I don't know. We'll see. It depends on what they think, of course. The other team that got knocked out was the St. Louis Blues. A couple years ago, went from worst to first. Pretty solid team. They've only got a couple of second and third liners kind of ready to hit the open market if it gets that far. They've made a couple of trades, so there's a couple of mid-round picks taken away from them in 2021 as well. This is just a stable team that got beat. They got run over by maybe the best team in hockey in Colorado, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I wouldn't expect too much here. You?
No, I wouldn't.
If anything, maybe they go make a splash because there's some young talent, air quotes, sitting here in Buffalo, by the way, that I think every team in the league is going to be looking at to make a quick, dirty upgrade. So I do think this is a team that could make a push and add a piece to take themselves closer to the Colorado situation. But they're a stable team. They're not going backwards by any means.
No, I don't think so. But there is a new caveat this year where there's an expansion team. That's right. So teams are going to have to be careful with who they want to protect and not protect, and go from there. Because with the Seattle expansion, I believe the rules are the same as when the Vegas Knights came in, or pretty close to the same. So that's going to be interesting to see with these teams. I can't remember with Ovechkin being a free agent if he is open to be whatever, or they have to still protect him, or how that would work. But some of these teams are going to have to be careful what guys that they protect and which ones they don't, because they may be on a different team for the expansion reason as opposed to just a different trade or free agency purposes.
Real quick, because it's always fascinating. We don't get it enough. I'm going to break it down for you real quick to finish off our segment here, Scott. The expansion draft is scheduled for July 21st, and that is the Seattle Kraken, of course. Seattle must choose at least 20 players who are under contract for the 2021-22 season. There's an upper limit on that as well. Here's how it works. Teams can protect 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie, or 8 skaters and 1 goalie. So you can be a little creative with it. But that's the max you can protect on your team. Anybody with a no movement clause at the time of that draft must be protected. They must be protected and will be counted. Anyone first year, second year in the league, or unsigned draft picks will be exempt from the selection. So if you've got new rookies that you love, long term on your franchise, you don't have to worry about those guys too much. They're pretty much exempt from this. Other than that, anybody under contract and has played at least 40 games, that's kind of the qualifying bar. And that's it. If you played 40 games this prior season and you're under contract for next year, you're pretty much open to it. So Seattle's going to have their pick. We saw what happened with the last one with Vegas.
Yeah, and is that rule different? Because I thought when Vegas came in, it was if you were just 3 years and under, you were automatically protected, or is the 40 games new?
It's a good question. It's a good question. But anyone under contract who played 40 last year and at least 70 in the prior 2. So,
yeah,
that's a pretty good chunk of the league, honestly. So you're gonna have some decent names. We're gonna have to do some shows specifically on just expansion holds and protections and things like that, because this is it's when fantasy becomes reality in this league, and it's really crazy fun stuff.
Well, in the fact that they're doing the same structure for a second time. The
NHL loved when Vegas won. They loved that quick win because, you're pumping so much money into the league directly through that new franchise. That's good for everybody.
It is. But where I was going to go is with the conversation that we've been having with, MLS soccer, baseball, with, and to a certain extent, football, with these expansions. I bet you these leagues are really watching these expansion rules very closely, having seen what happened with Vegas. If the Seattle Kraken end up becoming somewhat the same, making the playoffs in the first season and getting that influx of cash because you're not just having a bottom dweller, I bet you a lot of franchises / leagues are really paying close attention to the structure.
Yeah, I know Major League Baseball is really thinking about it, just for the revenue purposes because of what it'll bring to the new cities. But yeah, this is going to win. Seattle's a great sports town. This is going to be a win. And I think that there's plenty of players out there, either rostered or available via the draft right now, that can really push this team at least into contention quickly. Maybe not year one like Vegas, but It's built for them to win. It's kind of like I said, a fantasy becomes reality situation. So we'll certainly bring that up in the coming months here, as that's a July 21st expansion draft. Anything else from the weekend quickly before I get you out of here, Scott? NBA wise, how about that Madison Square Garden experience?
Oh, that was awesome. My question to you is, how many devices or screens did you have going at the same time this weekend?
Yeah,
because
that's where we are, aren't we?
I had 3 and 4 going at the same time. I had split screen on the TV, my phone, my iPad. I was all over trying to catch as much as possible, whether it was golf, racing, basketball, soccer, whether it was, I caught some of the women's soccer highlights on Twitter, some of the women's basketball on Twitter.
Great to see WNBA getting an ESPN midday coverage. Love to see that. Great game too. Awesome finish. It was all over the place.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, you had F1, you had Indy, you had everything yesterday. Literally everything you wanted yesterday. So, and most of it didn't disappoint. I guess real quick, Phoenix making you feel good so far?
Oh, yes, it did. When I was, I saw the Chris Paul injury, and I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
Please. And then when it happened to LeBron too, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
But the fact that Phoenix held their own, made you feel good. And not from the standpoint of that's who I picked to win it all, but from the fact that everyone had the Lakers, written in to move on. And the fact that Phoenix showed up and shows that they are legit contenders and can compete. And
well,
it's great to see.
I know a lot of people are going to wake up today and bash the Lakers and bash Anthony Davis and whatever the heck that was yesterday. But let's be fair to the situation. Number 8 Memphis beats number 1 Utah. Number 5 Dallas beats number 4 Clippers. Number 6 Portland beats number 3 Denver. Number 2 Phoenix covers. Number 2 Brooklyn covers. The Bucks cover. Number 5 Atlanta beats number 4 the New York, and of course the Sixers cover. Half of these matchups flipped backwards this weekend. So it's not just the Lakers, whether it was just a slow start, just fluky, maybe the fans back with the home crowd, that maybe that got some situations, a little bit messed up. But game 1 was fun. There's no question about it. We'll see if things kind of, manage back into proper order here over the next couple of days. But my quick takeaways, just to get off the NBA quickly here. I told you Dallas was for real, and I told you the Clippers were going to look like this. The Clippers just don't look like a team that can be prepared for a 7-game series. They'll have 1 or 2 great games, and to be fair, that's probably what Dallas is too. But to have the Clippers be as favored as they were in that West, that was a disaster for me. I would never have put $1 on that bet because Dallas can be the Clippers any day of the week. They're just very similar situations. And Brooklyn, yikes.
Yeah.
Brooklyn's yikes. That's my other takeaway there. But Philly can play ball. What do you think?
I think a lot of young stars are starting to show up.
Did you think that about Embiid? Did you see the Philly game at all?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, you and I have talked body language with Joel Embiid quite a lot, especially this year, and how he looks like he's bored or miserable or hates basketball or whatever. This is the very, very first time where I saw him not only get invested in terms of his body language, but get into it, get the crowd pumped up. You saw him himself motivate. This is the guy. I looked at that guy and I said, at the end of this playoffs, we could have a playoffs MVP out of Joel Embiid, which, by the way, shouldn't he be? He's in the number 1 seed of a conference. Like, that's exactly what those kind of players should be. So it shouldn't surprise people, but it would. It would surprise people if Philadelphia wins this thing and he's the reason why, and it shouldn't. He looked like the kind of guy that he needed to be maybe 8 years ago now, right? Jeez. Anything else? Any other takeaways?
No. Sort of a changing of the guard. I mean, we saw Trae Young take over, Luka take over. John Morant has stepped up and is starting to take over and make a real name for himself.
You're right. The kids all played. You're right, Scott.
DeAndre Ayton stepped up. Booker stepped up when Paul went down. We're going to have a show. It was something I thought of. We're going to have a talk about this NBA 2018 draft because there are two handfuls of guys that are going to be extension eligible this offseason. And I want to run down the list and just say,
but those won't kick in until 2023, correct?
Right.
So you're going to have
or 2023.
Right. Which means you're going to have this incredible rookie class who are all going to be max eligible players banking on that 2023 cap explosion. Massive contracts for these kids. Massive.
Yeah. Yeah. We're talking the Luka conversation, Trae Young, Ayton.
Super maxes will be well over 200.
This is going to be the 2022 season.
Right.
Because they're going into their fourth season next year. But we're talking legit players that I looked real quick. The 2018 rookie class had 1 rookie max extension.
Wow.
2019 had 3 rookie max extensions, and then last year had 4 rookie max extensions. Now there were other rookie extensions that were in there, but the rookie max extension has gone up. I think we're going to potentially surpass that 4 from last year with this class, and so we're going to have a deep conversation on that one.
Wow. So maybe 5 rookie maxes at 210, 215.
Oh, I think we could potentially be at 6, maybe 7.
Oh, okay. That's a lot of enchiladas. All right. Good stuff, Scott. Thanks.
Yep. Have a good one.
My thanks to The Athletic. Visit theathletic.com/SpotTrack for 40% off your first year subscription. And to Morgan Stanley Global Sports and Entertainment, empowering and financially aiding prospective and current NBA and NFL draft prospects before and after the process. Visit morganstanley.com/GSE for more information today. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Giannetti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Track Podcast.